And I mean, don't get it wrong. It's okay to have swag. Swag didn't mean what it means now. Swagger has always been a word. I do encourage you to use a dictionary and or Google and ask Siri to find out what it meant. There's a bravado, there's an ego, an air that you can have to yourself where your circumstances surrounding you can influence that. Perfect case in point, Brian Jew. A lot of people had a lot of issues with him doing his, I don't know, he did and everything. Brian Jew grew up around a lot of us over here. So having that experience is going to influence how you communicate and the things of that sort. He doesn't change the way that he dresses or anything. Urban gear is urban gear, but we're going to get into that. Urban gear is urban gear, but his activity was not disrespectful in whatsoever kind of way that might have been misinterpreted. That is his culture that he grew up in, not his race. Not his race, nor is it his ethnicity, which are two totally different things. So
I want to touch on the Brian Jew situation, since I remember a couple years ago I had made a video actually defending Brian, and he actually DM'd me with this sob story of why he made the video and why he feels like people shouldn't call him out on it and blah blah blah, which is whatever. I was young and I was like, oh cool, Brian Jew, you DM me on Twitter, that's awesome. That's all literally was my focus. But now thinking back to it, my only thing about the video was that the guy asked, imitate a black girl. And that was his first go-to imitation, and that's what kind of rubbed me the wrong way, and still kind of does. But I understand from his point of view, he was saying, well, I have black best friends, and I was just literally imitating one of my best friends, and she can defend blah, blah, blah. But, well, not all. I just feel like people
not
just
all
have
black
that.
women behave that way.
Yes, exactly. So that was my only thing. You know, that was having black friends. That's your moment to say, hey, look, not all black people act like this, but I do have a friend that I can imitate really well. Like that could have been like the conversation or like the response that he could have took on, but he didn't. So,
ladies, do you think a language can be appropriated?
Oh, sure. Well, as we keep saying, Korea is not about oppa, and using that, it happens in like the Japanese pop community as well. You take words that are easy to learn, that you hear a lot in the pop culture, in the shows and the songs, and you say, oh, I know what that word means, and then you start using it and throwing it into all of your conversation, and it's great to learn a language. Learning language is one of, I think, the most valuable things you can do, speaking more than one language. In America, we don't put enough emphasis on that. We say, oh, one language is fine. Everyone I've met who is from other countries speaks 3 to 5, and we're really behind it. So I think when you take something, but it's like using it as a prop. It's the same. Like I say, appropriation can go any way. It's the same as using a headdress as a prop. You're using a word as a prop. Like if you're just like talking in English and then suddenly like, oh, ah! It's like, okay, well, that's not part of your culture unless you're using it like if you like talk to your Korean friend who might actually be a man, it might actually be older than you, and say, is it okay if I call you oppa because I like K-pop and I would like to learn more about the culture by using it correctly? That's fine, but it is not a prop.
I don't know about, can I call you oppa because I like K-pop, but you know.
but unfortunately, I think most of the people, if you're here because you want to know more about cultural appropriation, you probably don't do that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, if you go out into the Staples Center tonight, there will be a large population of people that do that. And you know, I'm from the East Coast. I live in New Jersey, but I go into New York K-Town, and it's on the regular, that you'll hear, you know, international fans just screaming at, like, here's a better example. There was at Epic High during their tour, they did a show in New York, and one of the guys that works with the tour does slightly resemble G-Dragon, but there's like 150 girls in the crowd calling this guy G-Dragon. And my thing is, I would be pissed if someone called me some celebrity that I might somewhat look like with idols or with, you know, just how we're viewing Hallyu in general.
And back to what they were saying, you can use a language as a prop. Like specifically in K-pop, in the K-pop community, what I notice is people say, oh, sarange, oppa, I mean, like they just use those words just randomly, but I don't think a lot of them actually know
Korean.
what the actual, you know, meaning of those words. There's like a really good video on YouTube that my friend Megan Chonuniguk, I don't know if y'all, yeah, but she made a video called Can You Say Oppa, or Can I Call You Oppa? And it was like such a really good conversation about like the root of the word oppa, and that people in Korea rarely even call each other oppa, you know, unless like sometimes if they're dating, that's just a thing that they do. But outside of that, it's not a common thing to walk around and say oppa, oh oppa, oh oppa, especially if you don't know the person, you know. It's mostly if you know that person very well that you'll just be like, oh okay, oppa. Like I remember during my trip to Korea, this girl was calling her, one of her new Korean friends that she had just met, she was calling him oppa, and I just remember him over and over saying, stop calling me oppa, like we're just friends, like we're literally just friends, stop calling me oppa. And she would just go on to call him oppa, and he would just get annoyed each time she did it. And I'm just like, I just remember thinking this is like so ridiculous that people just swear they know what this word means. But
So before we move forward, take a deep breath in. Throw it off you. It's a lot to take in, isn't it? It's like, oh my God, now I got questions. Wait a minute, was I doing that wrong? But the flip side to that, just exactly what she says, more often than not, because I do speak Korean, and when I say speak, I do not mean fluency. Do not come at me with it. She's fluent. I am not fluent. That's nice that you think that though. But because I speak it, and because I do have low slanting eyes, which would be culturally stereotypical, most people, especially Ajima, see me and they immediately assume my mother was Korean. God rest her soul, she was not. But I am a polyglot. I love learning languages, as many as possible, as much as possible. So I speak it, and I do refer to my Korean older family who they treat me as such after letting me know I am treated as such, as oppa, onni, dulce, all of those things. And I communicate with that in confidence, so when I bring someone into that who sees it, they're ready to go. You said what to him? You call him oppa for real? I can say, no, you can't quite come out the gate like that. It's not the most natural thing. There's a progression to it that does not happen in English language. Not even with regional things. Me growing up in Detroit, the way that I refer to people when I'm back in the Midwest is not how I carry myself now as a Texas resident. You are going to be Miss A, B, and C, Mr. Da-da-da-da-da, things of that sort that I wouldn't do in the South. So, before we jump further into this is a good little conversation, isn't it? Yeah. All right, before we jump further into the things that we've itemized, we want to talk about, did anyone have something they would like to ask? Because I don't necessarily believe you should always have to wait until the end. Yes, sir. Thank you so much for being brave enough to ask something first.
Thank you. So, I'm from Ireland.
Yes.
I'm quite used to cultural appropriation.
I can only imagine.
Just try walking around St. Patrick's Day.
Yes. Everyone, all of a sudden, by t-shirt, is Irish.
Yeah. But, like, if you take an interest in another culture, right? Like, I've met a lot of Americans who are interested in Irish culture, but invariably, they're not in Ireland, so they're always going to mess it up, regardless. Like, they can't not mess it up.
Yes.
They have to have lived there for 10 years, which they're not going to do. But the thing is, like, if you want to grow as a person, to learn about another culture, take things from that culture, I feel like, like what you would call cultural appropriation, isn't that a stage you have to go through?
Interesting. If you did not hear him clearly, he's a man from Ireland, so cultural appropriation is something he has definitely experienced. And I know some of you might have had thoughts of past events in your mind, just pass on by. But, yes, shamrocks and shamrock shakes and other beverages for adults. So some of you might not have heard what he asked, but to make it as straight to the point as possible, in the process of learning and embracing society as a whole and your humanity and your place in the world, you're going to learn about other cultures. At some point or another, doesn't cultural appropriation end up being a stepping stone you either smash into, step over, things of that sort? There's some merging, but the way to keep yourself as neutral as possible, first and foremost, disclaimer, you're gonna piss somebody off no matter what. Get that out your system now if you think that you're not. Somebody's gonna be mad. It's how you carry yourself in the process of that. Someone's going to find fault in what you're learning or how you're learning it or why you're learning it or who motivated you to do so. If you are confident enough in what you're doing, where you say, well, this is what I know, I encourage you to check out so-and-so, so-and-so. Give them respectable reference guides to what you're doing and why, and let them educate themselves. Their assumptions are that of their own. So I don't necessarily know if you hit cultural appropriation and stay in that place. I know I didn't. There were some things that I did initially while learning about this particular culture that I didn't do with Japanese culture, and still pissed off a whole bunch of people, but I could give them a respectable point of, I learned this from someone who was born in Itaewon. This is what they told me. Or I learned this from the person who taught me the difference between Busan, a dialect, and Seoul Standard. But if you want to check me on it, why don't you check this website? So now that we are this wired, this global tied-in community, finding the resources is much easier. And finding credible, respectable resources is just as easy as well. So you do hit it, but you don't have to stay there. That's a personal choice. It's a personal choice.
I think it's easier to sometimes, it's more fun to stay within that realm. And I think that's my issue sometimes on the flip side with appropriation in K-pop. When idols are, they just give the excuse, no, I don't buy that anymore, because you know enough about, if you can sit down and tell me, like from my perspective, if I interview you and you can sit down and give me a list of 8 rappers that are your favorite rappers and tell me their songs, and then tell me I didn't know that you're appropriating something, you're BSing. It's easier to not, it's more fun to do the fun thing than actually to learn, I think, sometimes the breakdowns of, the unfortunate things. And like Ashley said, it does come back to you,